So we went over Helm of Mechazor earlier. That's 2 mechs that we could have had. Let's keep track in case it's funny. I don't really want 1-drops in most of my Gauntlet decks unless they're powerful cards in their own right. Like something like a Katara or a Bloodtear Alchemist, I'm not embarrassed playing that on turn 5. Right, it'll probably do something. Helm of Mechazor, not so much. Mana Death Grip. This card is pretty broken. It's currently, it's one of the cards people expect to get nerfed in the next balance patch when there is one. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd kind of like to see that. The card is so brutally efficient at doing what it does. In Gauntlet, it's probably a bit harder to set up. Like in Ladder, you can play 3 Heart Sister and 3 Mana Death Grip and 3 Flash Freeze and what have you. You play your Circulus on turn 1 and then your opponent plays whatever and you teleport it next to you and kill it with Mana Death Grip. And you're just so far ahead at that point. In Gauntlet, we have to face up to the fact that this is going to cost us a whole card. So the ramp might not be relevant after about turn 5. The 1 damage might not be impactful enough. Right, this is, with the Bloodtear Alchemist, you still get a 2-1 that can deal 2 extra damage somewhere, forces your opponent to walk over and hit it, whatever. So, although a Mana Crystal is better than a 2-1 body, generally speaking, Mana Death Grip kind of becomes deader than Bloodtear Alchemist does. It also can't ping the face, which Alchemist can. And then we have Void Hunter, and I actually really rate this card. It's generally underappreciated, I think, because you can play it in such a way that it threatens your opponent. Like if you're going to come closer to me, the Void Hunter is going to hit you in trade with your minions. Hitting them in the faces, they want to hit it with their face, and that's why it doesn't see much play because it just cycles. Right, they hit it and you draw the card, and you spend 3 mana not affecting the board realistically. But you can hide this, right? The nice thing about this is that if your opponent does find a way to hit it with their face and kill it for free, you deal 4 damage, which is not nothing, and you draw a card. So you've lost some mana, but you haven't really lost cards. You haven't lost card advantage. Like if you play a 3-2 and your opponent hits it, you're down a card. Not so much with Void Hunter, you're just down some mana, which is important, but not, it's not a complete blowout. But 4 power actually trades pretty well. Like this card attacks really well, and it's a good defensive rattlesnake. Like if you position this so that it will attack things and trade with them and you draw a card, your opponent will be like, oh, I don't want to give you that card advantage. I don't want to let you trade your Void Hunter for my minion that doesn't draw a card when it dies. So they'll try and avoid it. And that in itself, you can manipulate. And I found this effect to be quite handy. It's a reasonably powerful thing to do. So I think actually this pick is relatively close. Like, if we're playing Constructed, Mana Death Grip 100% every time, 3 of, no doubt, right? I play 3 of these in my Arcanist Fae deck. I don't play any Void Hunters. Not a question. I think as a Gauntlet pick is much closer because Mana Death Grip is going to eat up replaces later in the game. Void Hunter is also really good with Kara's Bloodborne spell. So possibly I just want this. 5-3 that when it dies draws a card. That's great. This does help us ramp out, helps us get to like Cryptographer, big plays sooner, helps us get to our currently non-existent 5-drops sooner. It looks like our curve's going to be kind of low, so we might just want this for the extra pressure. Like, so far, we're pretty aggressive. So I think I'm actually going to take the Void Hunter. The other thing is that I would gladly run like 2 or 3 of these, but I don't think I'd want more than 1 Mana Death Grip. So I guess that's also a consideration, given we're only 7 picks in. Oh, here we go. Enfeeble, Sworn Avenger, and Circulus. Now I regret passing passing the Mana Death Grip. Right, so these are all really powerful cards, and I think any of them would do well in our deck. So, Enfeeble is a really powerful board swing. This card had to be nerfed from 3 mana, so it's on that pedigreed list. At 5, it's quite slow. It's gonna be harder for us to play an Enfeeble and follow up, and it's also potentially quite bad because we're looking to be ahead on board most of the time and buffing our minions. So Enfeeble kind of helps with neither, which, considering it's up against 2 other pretty strong proactive cards, might give it the push. Sworn Avenger, this card is kind of famously strong, I think. It's a pretty powerful Gauntlet epic, and even sees play on ladder sometimes. Like, this effect, this card stacks up very quickly. It's not too hard for it to be a 4-3 in a turn or two, and a 4-3 range is such an insane proposition, especially for only 3 mana. It does die pretty easily, and it has the same problem as Veil Hunter, where if your opponent's near you, they can just kill it. But worst comes to worst, you can play it and then attack with your general and start with it at 2-3, which means at least it trades with the Saberspine Tiger. And Circulus, this is another really powerful value generator that's also very, very good with our Bloodborne spell, as are ranged minions like the Soul Avenger. This with Cryptographer can lead to some pretty frightening turns. Like, play this, play Crypto. It's 8 mana to make 2 4-3s, a 4-4, and a 3-5. That's not bad for 2 cards. But that is very much a late game play. But at least, it shows that we have some late game utility in the deck. The flip side is that playing this kind of commits us to picking more spells than I'm probably comfortable with. But later on, it just draws us cards every time we use the Bloodborne spell, which probably gives it the nod of the Avenger. The illusions do pollute the deck, but if you're only making them, replacing them for a couple of turns, that's not that bad. And they go well with just being cast anyway, thanks to the Kinetic Surge buffs. So I'm not too unhappy to just pick this. I think the fact that it can get immediate value the turn it's down probably makes it better than the Sworn Avenger. I think that's pretty close though. Oh boy. So we have this pretty powerful aggressive card. Goes well with any infiltrate minions, of which we currently have 2. Goes well with minions that would die to the opponent's general attacking them, of which we currently have quite a few. And it's really good in just an aggressive, tempo-y sort of playstyle, which we certainly have so far. And it's a spell for Circulus. So worst comes to worst, buff the team, draw a card. Fantastic. Spirit of the Wild, I think, is more of a combo piece. Like, we could make use of this. I think it's hard to envisage a deck that couldn't kill someone with Spirit of the Wild from, like, 15. If we have a couple of units near the enemy general, attack, reactivate, attack. But that's literally all it does. It is a very win more card. It's an example of the sort of card I mentioned earlier that can convert a leading board state into a dead opponent. And those kind of win more cards are a bit more powerful than the average. But I think Lightning Blitz does a pretty similar thing, to be honest. The flip side is if we're fighting in our half, it's not so effective. Because we can end up stranding our minions far away from the opponent. But we have a ranged minion. That's not that bad. And then there's this, which is also really powerful. Like, this card is just big. It hits like a ton of bricks. But I think as only 5 health for 5 mana, like, it does pass the vanilla test, but it's very difficult to actually get this card to activate. It's a shame, because it goes really well with Lightning Blitz. Actually, we have a Hearth Sister already. That might give this guy the nod, and we do need some big minions, rather than just more cheap, kind of snowbally effects. I've not really managed to successfully use Lightning Blitz before, I think. Like, there's going to be plenty of occasions where I want to play this, but I'm worried it might put my minions in the wrong place and stuff. Whereas this is just a big guy that your opponent really has to respect. So I think I'm going to take the Rhino. I think that's also very close, though. Right. This is going well. So Planet Scout is bad. Why is Planet Scout bad? Because, just like Helm of Mechazor, it dies to a general hit. Like, this thing steals a mana tile and then lets you play a minion in a funny spot. And then that's it. That costs you an entire card. Because this creature is going to do very little. Rock Pulverizer, again, we've already discussed this guy in some depth. And I'm not a fan. Frostfire, I am a huge fan of. So, the reason this card is really good... we already have a few cards that go very well with it. We have 3 Vespers, Crystal Cloaker, Snow Rippler, and Iceblade Dryad, which allow you to make an enormous minion that massively pressures and threatens your opponent as early as turn 2, right? You can attack with a 7/6 Crystal Cloaker on the second turn, and your opponent's just like, what on earth do I do about this? We've also got a Veil Hunter, so the value of a buff spell goes up pretty heavily when you have any number of ranged minions in your deck. And it's a spell for Circulus, so we can even essentially cycle it by making a 2/1 illusion off Circulus and replacing that, or playing the illusion for some effect. So we have a lot of cards that this goes well with. We have a Celerity in it, right? We're only 10 picks in, and this goes really well with like half our deck. That's awesome. Like, this card has the right balance of power level synergy payoff level, like the amount of tempo you get from casting it on a Vesper is absurd. And efficiency, like it's only 2 mana. You know, it's pretty good. If you think about, you know, you can cast it on a Vesper and kill something, or you can cast it just to buff a minion and then let it die or trade off. Like, Thumping Wave is pretty similar, right? I'm not saying this card is as good as Thumping Wave, because it's not. It's not as impactful as Thumping Wave, but it's also only 2 mana. It's really, really strong. I don't know if I want 2 of these in any given deck, right? Because the card is somewhat situational. It is a pump spell. You don't want 2 of many of those, but its power level is really high. So we're now definitely on the hook to produce more Vespers. Oh, this is pretty interesting. So, Golden Mantella, this guy draws a card, right? Essentially, you get the battle pet and you replace it. Of note, A, we already have a Void Hunter, which is a pretty similar card. B, we don't want to have too many of this effect, right? We already have a Circlus and a Snow Rippler, as unlikely as the Snow Rippler is to actually draw a card. The more stuff we have that pollutes our deck with bad cards, the worse our deck gets as we try and generate value, which can backfire on you later on when you start drawing the crap again. Like, the last thing you want to do is draw a rock and replace it into an illusion. You'd be like, oh, well, I just wasted a turn. Storm Aretha, this is not really what I want out of the 6-drop, because, again, only 5 health, like, this thing doesn't have much of an impact. It is a fairly powerful card in that if you play it defensively and then start attacking with it or buffing it, it can do a lot of damage wherever you need very quickly. So your opponent does have to respect the threat that it presents on the board. But what I want from my bombs is the ability for me to just chuck them on the table and say, you deal with this. And Storm Aretha is not quite big enough for that. Warmaster, this card is pretty similar to Void Hunter or Golden Mantella in that your opponent's general can only hit it once per turn, right? Unless they have Bangle of Blinding Strike, I guess. So they hit it, and then you still get a 3-2, which can trade with something else. Plus, even if all it does is hit the opponent's general twice, that's 6 damage, which is kind of close to becoming worth it compared to the average, 3 or 4 damage you get from a typical 2 toughness, cheap early creature. So I think the fact that this produces extra board presence over the Mantella, assuming you don't want to cast the pet, because again, pets are bad, right? Or the Void Hunter, probably gives it the nod. Like, this pick is reasonably close. Like, the War Master's not an amazing card. Mantella is quite good. But the fact that, like, you can play this and then just keep replacing into the pet, or worse, cast the pet and have it just backfire on you or do nothing, makes it a bit awkward. Like, sometimes you'll play it and you'll get one of the bigger pets, like the 3/3 or the 2/5 Celerity, and that's quite a lot of board presence for turn 1. Like, you play this guy on the mana tile, you play the pet. The problem is your opponent can redirect the pet and then attack the Mantella with their face. Maybe they take some damage, but unless you've got a way to follow up on that, it's not so good. And we have some ways, like, this deck is quite aggressive, but I think the War Master is better overall. It's good body blocker as well for later. I think that's pretty reasonable. Thorn Needler, Fire Spitter, and Avalanche. Here comes some bad cards. So this 4 toughness is really not exciting in a 4-drop. I mean, this guy hits like a ton of bricks, obviously, but you have to actually have him survive a turn first. Not very good. I guess he does go quite well with Hearth Sister, though. So that might give him a nod. And he goes very well with Kara's Bloodborne spell, actually. Like, a 7/5 is pretty hefty. Fire Spitter. Speaking of things that go well with Kara's Bloodborne spell, this is a decent-sized range unit. This card itself, I don't really like Fire Spitter. Like, 2 toughness on a 4-drop is really punishable by your opponent. Like, they can remove that on the cheap and develop another threat, and you're really falling behind. But if you stick this guy, it's pretty hard to lose the game. So that it has that in its favour, whereas Thorn Needler is just a body. Avalanche, this card is extremely situational. Sometimes you can bait people into avalanches. Like, we have enough infiltrate minions that people will want to run into it, and it might be worth picking just on that basis. But that said, we've only seen 2 infiltrates so far. We probably need a bit more unless people are really keen on playing around it. And even then, the people who are really keen on playing around infiltrate can just stand in the middle row and play around avalanche as well. So I think I'm just going to take this Fire Spitter. It's a potential win condition, which is more than can be said for the other cards. Oh my god. We're going to have the most aggressive deck in the world. So I've already gone over Bloodletter, why that's bad. Blue Tip Scorpion trades up quite well, but it also trades down really easily. Like, this thing dies to anything. Ping effects, ranged units, 2 drops, 1 drops, wraithlings, whatever. This card is way too fragile to actually play, considering that it doesn't have any value when it enters the battlefield. Like, yes, it can trade with a Hailstone Golem, but it's never actually going to. And then Rustcrawler. This thing is actually pretty good. Like, the utility of being able to get rid of a random artifact is nice. It's nice knowing you have an insurance policy if they play a Grincher and roll Arclight Regalia. It's nice knowing you have an insurance policy if they just have an Arclight Regalia, I guess. And it's a 2-drop on top of all that. So I think I'm going to pick this guy. I need some, like, other stuff. This curve is pretty bad. Alright, here we go. Here we go. So, Storm Metal Golem is the bomb I like. I like this and Silverbeak or, you know, higher rarity cards. But we're a bit early in the draft for me to pick this over these 2 cheaper, useful cards that can do powerful things. Silhouette Tracer is actually quite nice. It gets you out of sticky situations, but more importantly, it lets you kill Veil Hunters. This card is a removal spell in the early game, and that's pretty handy. The fact that it also lets you play with Infiltrate minions is a bonus for us. Like, we can teleport it into their base and kill something, and then also be ready to deploy Infiltrate minions the next turn. Necroseer, I also quite like this card. It's just a decent tool for trading and grinding and drawing extra cards. Like, I think Necroseer is solidly underrated as a tool. It doesn't die trivially. You know, even if your opponent trades a 2-drop and they're face for it, they took 5, you killed their 2-drop and you drew a card. That's probably worth 5 mana, right? Like, if that was a spell, like, deal 3 damage, excuse me, like Cobra Strike that deals extra damage to their face and draws a card. You play the crap out of that, right? It's great. So, yes, they get some agency over it, but the card is very rarely actually punished. The fact that it has Dying Wish draw a card like Void Hunter means that if your opponent kills it in like the most ridiculously efficient way possible, that's okay, you still drew a card. The only bad thing that happens to it is it gets transformed, which only happens against a couple of factions. Sometimes people will dispel it, and they're using up a card just to dispel it, and you still have a 5/4. It's fantastic. So I actually really like this, but I'm not going to pick it over the Tracer, which is cheaper, has removal utility, which we don't have any removal yet. We have 1 spell. So we have an Iceblade Dryad. That's our main removal spell right now. So, and I guess some ranged units. So we really need to be able to kill stuff. So Silhouette Tracer is our man here. Ooh, legendaries. Ooh, good legendaries. Alright. I think you can all tell what the pick is. But let's go over the others anyway. So, Hollow Grove Keeper, this is mostly a tech card. This guy's hit, right? This is useful when Lionar are everywhere on the ladder and you need some answer to Ironcliff Guardian after Ironcliff Guardian. You put some Hollow Grove Keepers in your deck and you don't feel too great about it. There are not that many legendaries I would pick this over. I think it's not very exciting. Red Singer, I really like this card. It's big, it's bomby, it's removal, it gets value the turn it comes down. Really strong card. Like, the fact that you can play this in a position such that it only hits 1 minion and then attack with your general makes it very, very strong as long as you're not completely behind, as long as you're not absolutely dying. It also makes it easier for you to protect yourself when you're being attacked, because if your opponent tries to ignore the Singer and come after you and the Singer's next to their minions, it will kill them as they hit you, allowing you to swing back the board next turn. Unfortunately, if you're generally, in practice, if you're in that position, you're dying anyway. So her defensive utility is not that great. She's mostly like, you can basically consider her ability to be an opening gambit. You know, deal 2 damage to your general and 7 damage to an enemy, which is still a really strong card. Jack's True Sight is a bonkers win condition by itself. If your opponent doesn't have an AoE, this thing will kill all of their creatures and then them. I think that gives it the nod over Singer. The fact that it goes so well with the Bloodborne spell, like, we can play this. No, we don't actually have the mana to do this in Cryptographer. We need a Mana Forger for that. No, that doesn't even work either, does it? Okay, we can't play this in Cryptographer to do 2 Bloodborne spell pings in the same turn. But we can use Cryptographer to make sure we have the Bloodborne spell available when we Jax, which is quite useful, actually. I've played Kinetic Surge Jax on ladder. It's not pretty. if they don't have an AoE that can kill it, which only a couple of the factions have, they just die, right? So against Lionel, there's Tempest. Magmar have Plasma Storm. Vanar have Frostfire. And then there's Breath of the Unborn out of Abyssian, which is not that commonly played. There's Vitruvian are screwed. And Songhai are also screwed. They don't really have answers to it. So the fact that two factions can't even deal with a buffed Jax makes it a super strong pick. Oh god. Okay. So we've discussed these two already. I picked the Fire Splitter last time and we'll probably do so again. The other card in consideration is this Dragonbone Golem. Again, like, we don't really need random big creatures. We might as well just grab them later on in the draft because they'll come up relatively frequently. There's enough 6 and 7 drops in the game that they'll show up. Spear plus Ghost Lightning. That is true. They can kill it if they have another legendary and a specific spell that's bad, normally. I mean, they can have like double Scorn or something. It's possible for them to kill a Jax. Or they can just be, ahead on board and have creatures spread to the 4 winds. But generally, it's just very hard to deal with. And even against factions that do have AoEs that can kill it, they have to actually have it in their deck and hand, which is not a given in Gauntlet at all. As you say, but yeah. Yeah, so we don't need this Golem yet. He can come up later. We don't want this Thorn Needler very much. Like, it's okay, but not very exciting. Compared to this ranged unit, which can do a lot of damage, potentially. We are risking some heavy tempo loss by playing these ranged units, but... Oh, thank God, a decent 4-drop. Okay. So, I've gone over why playing on Scout is bad. I've touched on why 3/2s are bad, because again, they die to an enemy general. 3 power does mean this guy at least trades with minions relatively well, but dies to general and has no abilities do not a good combination make. Like, worst comes to worst, worst thing is, if you take a mana tile with Skyrock Golem, your opponent's general can usually move down and kill it. So you get your mana tile, but you use up a card. For only 3 damage. It's not very exciting. This card, on the other hand, is awesome. It's even better if you buff it with Kara's ability, but mostly it's just great with, being a provoke, locks down your opponent's stuff. It's large, it trades very well. They have to attack it with multiple things usually, which will leave them either dead or weakened. It's not massive, like it does die to Plasma Storm. It dies to big minions, but even like, it takes until about 6 mana before there are minions that can kill a Primus Shield Master in 1 hit. And it's also, excuse me, it's also protected from a lot of cheap removal by being 6 toughness. So this card is just really good overall. Really solid turn 2 play. Solid later on as well. Alright, Planar Scout we can ignore. So this is interesting. Blood Tier Alchemist or Necroseer? So, at the moment we already have quite a low curve. Our deck is very heavily leaning on 2 drops, and we'll probably get a couple more before the end of the game. End of the draft even. So we don't need early plays. We do, however, need removal. And Blood Tier Alchemist is removal of Assault. He's not the best removal, but, as anyone who's played with the card on ladder can attest, it's surprisingly relevant to have 1 damage available in your hand, especially at such a low cost. Like, minions hit each other and end up on 1 HP, it happens. He doesn't get any particular benefit when buffed with Kara, like, making 3/2s instead of 2/1s is good when you do it en masse, like with Circulus, but making 1/2/1 into a 3/2 is not very exciting. He does also use up an entire card, so the situational value is kind of offset by the fact that generally this card isn't very exciting. Necroseer, so we kind of want this, like, our curve, I want my curve to be a bit fatter in the 4 and 5 sections. We don't need that many 5 drops, but I do want to be able to play on curve into the mid to late game and be able to keep up with my opponent on cards. We haven't really picked anything that's massively negative in terms of card advantage. Cryptographer is a bit sketchy sometimes. Hearth Sister can be situational, but usually our cards are, they're alright. But I want to pull ahead. I want to be able to get a card up on my opponent without necessarily having to rely on getting lucky trades. Like, sometimes you'll get a favourable trade, but usually your opponent's general can clean that stuff up, which is why we have Frostfire to go face and punish them for that. But I do actually want something that can be a solid body that I'm okay if it dies. I'm just going to play it and see if my opponent has a clean answer to it, which is pretty unlikely considering what it actually is. Plus, you know, it's not terrible if we buff it, right? A 6/5 that draws a card. It's quite a lot of board presence, so I'll pick this guy. Twilight Sorcerer, the Scientist, and Chassis of Mechazor. Cryptographer lets you spend mana without cards. That's sort of true, but he's only 2 mana in the first place. So you're, like, he uses up 3 of your mana. Cryptographer's main value is that he's just really good with Kinetic Surge. Like, that's just a lot of stuff, a lot of stats. So, Twilight Sorcerer is almost certainly going to get us another Kinetic Surge, which is actually not awful, right? Like, we can double Kinetic Surge with that, which is great with Jax. It's great with Circulus. The price we're paying is having a body that's realistically a 4 mana body rather than a 5 mana body. And if we want to use the Kinetic Surge straight away, that's 6 mana for a 4/7, which is also not very exciting. But it's a decent option, right? Like, there's some utility to that. And worst comes to worst, it's a 3/6 that drew a card. That's what we were looking for, right? Card advantage. Just replace the Kinetic Surge. Hope you never draw it again. So that could be pretty strong. Scientist, I love this card. We don't really have anything that goes with it. Like, we have a Frostfire. I don't really want to play a 6/6 for 6 that has very little potential value. Like, if I was playing Kalios or Arjun, I would slam this. Like, the table would shake. I would slam this so hard. This card is awesome with a general that can target it. But with us, it's fine. Like, it makes the Frostfire cantrip. That's pretty nice, I guess. And then there's this, which is also pretty good with Kinetic Surge. And just a solid 4-drop that's hard to interfere with. You know, it's not going to let us build mechas or anytime soon, but I will quite happily take a 5/4 Shroud for 4 or a 6/5 Shroud for 5. That's pretty strong as cards go. Like, that might bait out some Dispel. 4 health isn't that great. Like, this dies to a general hit plus a 2-drop, which is not usually what you want from your on-curve 4-drop that doesn't do anything else. Unlike, say, Necroseer, which then draws an extra card. But it goes really well with our buffs. So I think it's relatively close between these. I feel like I'm lacking in just sort of like on-curve plays. So I might pick this just to avoid being too cute, right? Like, this card is, like, it sort of draws a card. It's kind of cool. It does put a blank card in your deck, but it also has some synergy with Circulus and stacking buffs and things. That's pretty cool. It's good with Jax as well, I guess. Actually, maybe I should pick it just because it can make Jax's tokens into 3/3s so they survive Tempest. And Breath of the Unborn? Yeah, you know what? That's probably worth it. Like, that makes Jax even more unkillable. We're going to go for that.